So how can you do really well and be really successful at this new challenge? Well, here's 5 tips and tricks for you to focus on. One is this: genotype determines phenotype. Now, you might remember genotype refers to the genetics, the allele combination, big E, little e. Phenotype is going to refer to the physical trait. Physically, what do you see? You'll notice that if I have a big E, little e, then I'm going to have wings in that dragon. Little e, no wings in that dragon. So remember that principle: genotype, the genetics, determines the phenotype, physically what you see. The other thing to focus on is these 6 possible crosses for one trait, and remembering these percents. So if you cross these 2 dragons and both dragons are heterozygous and dominant, then you're going to be guaranteed to have wings. But you'll also be guaranteed to have wings if you cross a homozygous dominant with one that's heterozygous. Similarly, a homozygous dominant with homozygous recessive, all of these result in 100% wings. So when you are working through the Geniventure and you're looking for minimum number of moves, you might only have to change 1 or 2 of these alleles to get a combination where you're guaranteed to have wings, 100% chance of wings. The only way you're not going to get 100% chance of wings is if you have a combination that looks like this: heterozygous and heterozygous. Or in this case, heterozygous with homozygous recessive. In that case, if you need to have a dragon that doesn't have wings and you're looking for a minimum number of moves, again, consider just changing one of those alleles so that you can have the potential for a wingless dragon. The only way to guarantee a wingless dragon is to have 2 homozygous recessive combinations. Another thing to remember is what Mendel called the law of independent assortment. Basically, that means one trait does not determine another. For example, if you're dealing with the horn, it will have no bearing on the wings. Or if you're dealing with the wings, the wing trait has no bearing on the arms. It has no connection. The wings are independent from the arms. The arm trait is independent from the legs. So changing the arm trait around will not make any difference when it comes to the leg traits. All right? So just because a dragon has one trait, like orange, does not mean it's going to have another trait like wing. All right? So the traits are not determined by another. Here's another tip, and that's what's sometimes referred to as the central dogma of biology. That is that DNA determines the RNA sequence. The RNA sequence will determine the protein. So you might remember this as transcription and translation. But the idea is whatever that DNA code is, that's going to eventually make that protein. That protein is eventually going to be shown in some kind of physical trait. The Geniventure is going to emphasize this. Round 3 has a whole bunch of challenges that have a lot to do with the protein structures and the way those proteins work. And those proteins are going to be what determines these physical traits. If you have these proteins, you'll have these traits. If the proteins aren't working, then the traits won't show up or the traits won't work properly. But if you can go back and change the genetics, that will change the proteins, that will change the phenotype physically, what's happening. And then finally, don't be afraid to retry. So whenever you're working on a level, it's okay your first time through to just go straight to disaster. But use that to experiment. All right. So even though your end score is going to be terrible, by learning from your experiments, you're going to get the information you need to know so that when you go back and redo it, you'll come through with flying colors. So definitely go back, redo sections, get those scores better as you start to figure out what exactly you need. Use the trait tracker. All right, so that's the trait tracker. Use that document. I used it extensively because that's going to help keep track of my results. That's going to help you perform better. All right, so keep a record of what works, what doesn't, what happened at each level, so that as you get toward the end, you have to put all these pieces together. You're going to have a reference sheet you can go back to. And keep trying. This is a lot about experiments, a lot about science, observation, a lot about applying principles that you might learn. So don't give up, all right? It can be tricky, and it can be challenging. Keep trying, keep keeping records, and that'll help you as you get further along. And then as you learn about some of these principles, keep applying the principles. They don't go away. They keep coming back as you get further along. So some of these tricks and tips, I hope they help you out to be successful on your Geniventure.